Once again, welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. We always have a lot to talk about, but it's the week after a pretty pivotal election, and so I suspect we're going to have a lot more than usual to talk about this week. Happy to welcome Ryan Silverstein back to the program. Ryan, great to see you once again. For those meeting you for the first time, take a second and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a JD candidate at Villanova University. I'm also a fellow with Villanova University's McCollin Center for Law, Religion, and Public Policy. So I do a lot of research into law and how that affects politics and policy.
And I'm looking at an article you wrote for Real Clear Politics about using law as a political weapon undermines public trust in elections. Wow. Did we see that in great clarity this year, or what?
No, I mean, we did. It was really interesting because you had these third-party candidates across the country who were running for office, Jill Stein, Cornel West, Robert F. Kennedy. And you had Democrats actually suing to keep these candidates off the ballots, which was odd because you kind of expected Democrats to be like, hey, we support democracy, so these third parties can stay on the ballot.
Yeah, well, and I'm not trying to rub salt in anybody's wounds, but even the way that they got their nominee, Kamala Harris, was not a particularly democratic process. As far as I know, it wasn't the will of the voters. It was more a matter of, the people who know will appoint her. And anyway, but about these third-party voters, talk to me about the different lawsuits that were filed, and what were some, you mentioned three in particular, Jill Stein, Cornel West, and Robert F. Kennedy. Of those three, it seems like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was the one who came out the best from this situation, but that involved him actually dropping out as a candidate.
Yeah, so with RFK in particular, what was really interesting is Democrats were actually suing to keep RFK on the ballot, and they lost those lawsuits. Thank God they did. In most states they lost, some of them they won, but those weren't super big states, and they didn't matter in the end. As for Jill Stein, they sued in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania to keep her off the ballot. In Georgia as well, in Wisconsin, what was super interesting is that the Democrats tried arguing that because there were no statewide office holders in Wisconsin, she couldn't be nominated for the Green Party in Wisconsin, but that's just not true. In Michigan, with their lawsuit, Democrats they tried using a really big technicality, and they tried using this technicality against Cornel West too, where they were saying, well, you didn't provide a signed affidavit, and therefore all your petitions don't count. And the court actually rebuked them, and the court specifically said this procedural mechanism is not meant to be used to preclude candidates who otherwise would have qualified from being on the ballot. It's meant to prevent fraud.
Wow. Now, I want to be equal, give equal interest here to the Republicans as well as the Democrats, but do the Republicans have a tendency to use lawfare, or at least use the law to sway elections in their favor? Or is this something we're primarily seeing from the Democratic ranks, at least in this last election cycle?
Yeah, so in this cycle, in terms of the presidential election, it's something we saw exclusively from the Democratic Party. I looked for hours looking for an example of Republicans suing to keep Chase Oliver off the ballot. And I didn't find a single instance where Chase Oliver was being sued by the Republican Party to be kept off the ballot in any pivotal state. And I think what's notable about that is you actually look at these campaign strategies, it was very different. You actually had Donald Trump go to the Libertarian National Convention, and you had Donald Trump court Libertarian voters. He offered Libertarians multiple policies, including tariffs, getting rid of the income tax. So I think Donald Trump's strategy was, instead of relying on the law to get rid of Chase Oliver, he chose to nullify Chase Oliver by trying to appeal to his voters, and I think that worked. If you compare that to the Harris campaign, the Democrats, it kind of looks like they wanted to ignore the left flank of their party and just force them to fall in line, and I don't think that worked very well for them.
Let's talk a little bit about the effects that using the law in that way, what does that do for the voters in terms of their trust in the system? Because, look, I'll just count myself as one of those people who, since 2020, I've had some pretty serious questions about whether or not I can really trust the system, or if it's just a little too easy to be gamed. Does this kind of lawfare tend to undermine that faith even further?
I mean, Gavin, you're right. It does. Voters are already skeptical of the ballot box. A recent poll found that 40% of Republicans and 26% of independents are not confident that their ballots will be counted accurately. A separate poll found over 50% of voters are concerned that ballots are not counted accurately and that mail-in ballots or drop boxes are illegally used or misused. And I think by using lawfare, right, by using very minor procedural technicalities in the law to prevent candidates from being on a ballot, it will it will exasperate that distrust on the primary basis of if I can't even vote for, if I'm being artificially limited in who I can vote for, why should I even trust that my ballot will accurately be counted?
No, I think that's a fair point. And it just goes to show you that, I think this is attributed to Mark Twain about the idea of, well, if voting really made a difference, they would have outlawed it. And I chuckle when I say that, but I understand, too, that there are people who believe that, well, it seems like our choices are artificially limited sometimes. And talk to me about the benefit of, granted, some of these third-party candidates, they're a little bit out there in terms of they're running on issues that more mainstream candidates really don't want to touch. But why is it important that they have access to the system and to the voters, just like those big party candidates?
Yeah, so sure, campaigns are fundamentally about issues. Especially presidential campaigns, what vision do you have for this country? And with these third parties like the libertarians, like Tulsi Gabbard, like RFK, like Jill Stein, like Cornel West, etc., they were all pushing for ideas that were outside of the mainstream. And that can actually push candidates to adopt some of those positions. You saw Donald Trump really kind of adopt RFK's, hey, I'm going to make this country healthy again platform. You had Donald Trump really adopt Tulsi Gabbard's, we're going to be the pro-peace party, the pro-peace president platform. Those third parties, I think, really pushed Donald Trump to adopt ideas outside of the political norm, and that helped him win. You contrast that to the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris. She wouldn't take a position on Israel. She wouldn't take a position on whether or not she was progressive or moderate. And those third parties were trying to push her to adopt some kind of progressive stance and respect the left wing of her party. And she didn't do that, and I think that's one of the reasons she lost.
I have to give credit to Trump. He built a coalition of people from across the political spectrum, and that's, to me, that's quite an indicator of leadership. Now, whether he walks on water or not, I'm not trying to suggest yes he's got all the answers, but the fact that he could bring in people like Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. or even Elon Musk and get all of them on the same page to agree that this is where we need to pool our efforts, that's pretty remarkable to me. I'd love to get your reaction to that.
No, I think it's remarkable. I think it shows that we are a pluralistic country and we should absolutely continue to embrace that pluralism. And when you ignore the broad needs of the electorate and focus on your hyper-partisan base, you lose. If Kamala Harris took positions on anything, I think she wins and the third parties would have gone her way. Instead, she gave her left flank nothing, and that really hurt her.
So we've got about a minute left here, Ryan. I just want to kind of get your down and dirty analysis of the outcome of this election. I'm not, asking you to say, yay, the Republicans won or yay, the Democrats lost. But overall, does this feel like a positive shift in terms of what the outcome was?
It definitely was positive because of how much shifts occur. You had voters who were concerned about democracy vote for Donald Trump. Voters who were split on abortion. Voters split on abortion between Trump and Donald Trump. It was 50-50 between Trump and Harris. Donald Trump made gains in the Latino community. He made gains amongst women. I mean, this was a broad coalition with a broad mandate to govern, and I think it's a good thing for the country for Donald Trump to have such a broad mandate because now he can govern effectively and in accordance with the electorate's wishes.
Okay, I appreciate your take on that. I know it seems like a really loaded question, and some people may try to read more into it than there is, but I'm feeling optimistic, and frankly, a week ago, I wasn't so sure. So, Ryan Silverstein, thank you so much for your time. Ryan is a Young Voices contributor. Where else can we find your work, and where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Ryan Silverstein. You can find me on X at Ryan916, and that's it.
Okay, thanks so much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. Hey, we're happy to welcome a new contributor to the episode this week. Her name is Stacia Wilson. Stacia, good to have you on the program. Could you take just a moment to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Brian. I am an entrepreneur and digital nomad. I actually started a news publication in 2020, and we were trying to do unbiased, peer-reviewed news. And then in 2023, I transitioned to a tech startup, trying to accomplish the same goals, but in a more efficient and effective way. And then now I'm transitioning to AI because AI seems like it'll actually provide the solution that I was looking for.
I'm looking at the headline of an article you've written, and I have to tell you, this absolutely grabs me and pulls me in. A maximally truth-seeking AI must include wrong information. And I had to read that a couple of times and think about why would that be so? I'm actually going to pose that question to you. Why would it be important that we have access to wrong information as well as right information?
Right. Well, the title, of course, is meant to be a bit, spicy. But
it's a hook.
Yeah. But what I mean by that is it's really, well, I found this out from running my unbiased news publication. You actually have to include information that you don't agree with, and opinions that you don't agree with, especially for unfolding stories or even stories where there's a large group of people that have a different opinion. If they don't see that they're represented in the work, even if you end up saying, well, there's also this context that they're forgetting, or, even if you add more context to the wrong information, it's still important to include it because right now people are so divided ideologically. And if we're going to bridge that divide, we have to understand what evidence other people are seeing and basing their opinions on. And in my experience, people usually have reasons, right? It's not that people are just stupid, they're seeing some evidence. It's just different evidence than what I'm seeing. So if AI is going to help us bridge that divide, it has to include all kinds of different perspectives. And that means one of those perspectives is probably wrong. Maybe all of them are wrong in some ways. And so I think we shouldn't be afraid of wrong information, but the goal should be to be adding context so that people can make decisions for themselves with all the information and can understand each other. Beautifully
said. I love the example you use in your article right from the very beginning about using cigarettes. And could I have you share that example as to illustrate what you're talking about sometimes even wrong information still can be useful in helping us understand something?
Yeah. So in the early 90s, the 20th century, cigarettes were thought to be healthy, right? So like all the health organizations, doctors would prescribe cigarettes. They were prescribed for like pregnant women and for stress and just all kinds, like a long list of like.
Here, have another. Issues. You're smoking for two now.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that would have been the mainstream, establishment position is like cigarettes are good for you. And now I think we would all disagree with that position. So, it's important to have those dissenting views and let the conversation happen,
Yeah, I mean, you point out they were included. This was part of the standard, rations and comfort rations for the soldiers who served in World War II. Make sure they've got cigarettes. They're going to need them. That's a stressful job, and this is one way that a person can relax and overcome stress. And granted, we know better ways, but. Talk to me about, first of all, I want to just get a little bit deeper clarification on when we talk about maximally truth-seeking as it pertains to AI. Could you break that down for me? And what does that mean when we use that phrase?
Yeah, it's a phrase that Elon Musk has been using a lot lately. And he always brings up the example of Gemini producing like Nazis that are very diverse, or diverse founding fathers. And so he's using that example to say Gemini is not maximally truth-seeking, and he wants Grok and XAI to be maximally truth-seeking. I actually think the current LLM model for AI that we have, it's going to struggle a bit with truth-seeking because it's not actually seeking truth. It's statistics, right? So it's using all its training data and then producing the most statistically kind of likely response, like probabilistically. So it's not actually like analyzing the statistics. It's not checking the data itself. It's not, doing that reasoning portion for itself. So I'm not sure if you can actually say it's truth-seeking right now. I would hope we would have that in the future. But I think the overall idea that Musk is trying to say, and what I'm trying to say, is that right now we have AIs that people are using to understand the world, right? People are using their AIs to ask them questions about current events, about science, history, and we need those AIs to be producing the most true answers possible.
Which you point out in your article means that it has to be able to draw from a very wide breadth of information. It can't just be what's, I'm going to use the word fashionable, or what is considered by the mainstream to be the only acceptable answers. It has to have some other breadth to choose from.
Yeah, and I see the value in institutions and in academic institutions, right, and in experts and scientists. And I have seen a lot of people run into issues when they try to understand something that's very specialized and they're not an expert in the field, and then they can easily misunderstand the data. So I get that there's a place for experts. I'm glad that the people programming the AIs take that into account. But as we saw during like the COVID pandemic, there can be different kinds of experts. Experts can be saying different things, especially when it's an unfolding situation. Even like the CDC was like, don't wear masks. And then they were like, wait, no, wear masks, right? And so even the same institution can change their position as new data comes out. And and there were dissenting bodies about the mask issue as well, right? Even when the CDC was saying one thing, there were always people saying another thing and giving their reasons for that. And so I think the AI shouldn't be too certain about the mainstream position, and should be trying to bring in, especially when it's unfolding or not settled, or there's major conflicting opinions among experts, it should be bringing in different perspectives.
Stacia, talk to me about why it's important, not just for AI, but for us as thinking human beings. Why is it important that we sometimes consider non-mainstream opinions?
Because we shouldn't be too certain of ourselves, because if the truth matters, right? We use information and our worldview to make decisions about what to eat, where to go to school, what job to get, what the future is going to look like, and how to plan for it, where to invest our money, right? So the truth matters, and it's important that we be maximally truth-seeking, right? Because it affects our lives in real ways. And so I like to think of truth-seeking as being a probabilistic thing myself, where I'll think, how certain am I of something, right? And try to hold it with some, not 100%, but hold it with some like, I've seen this evidence, so I'm maybe like 60% sure. But it should never be 100% for most things, right? Most complex things.
I think that is such good advice, and I just want you to know I'm really proud to hear you say that, just because it's a really liberating attitude when you can say, look, I could be wrong here, or when you're confronting an issue or something and saying, okay, what do I know about this that wasn't told to me by someone else? That's where wisdom begins. Again, we are talking with Stacia Wilson. Stacia, where can people find you on social media? Where can they follow your work?
I have a Substack called How to Change Your Mind, and I write about sense making there. I'll probably get into writing more about AI there. I also have a Twitter, Original Stacia, and those will be the best places.
Welcome back. This is our third segment today of Moving Forward with Young Voices. Hey, we're happy to welcome Ethan Watson back to the program. Ethan, it hasn't been that long since we talked, but for the sake of those meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Ethan Watson. I'm a student at the University of Kansas getting a master's degree in accounting. I've also studied political science during my time here. I'm a writer for Young Voices, and I'm working on applying to law school right now. So lots of testing and schooling in my future, but I love to learn, and I'm having a blast with it.
Well, I'm looking at an article you wrote for Real Clear Politics about make Election Day a federal holiday and require in-person voting. And that seems like a pretty timely topic, even though the election was a week ago today. Let's talk a little bit about the benefit of not only making it a federal holiday, but parlaying that into in-person voting.
Right, absolutely, Brian. So I think there's really two reasons why this is a good idea. And the first is one that you hear thrown around a lot, especially by guys like Vivek Ramaswamy. It's that for election security reasons, we need to go to a more in-person, single-day voting system. And I think he's on the right track with that because it's pretty obvious that neither side has a ton of faith in the results of our elections. Republicans have been harping on this for years after the 2020 election, saying, it was rigged. And I don't even know if there's any merit to that. On the flip side, after this election, we've seen Democrats saying, oh, well, this is rigged too. Where did all those 15 million votes from 2020 go? And Elon Musk somehow hacked the machines using Starlink. That one's kind of crazy. But the point is that there's a lot of questions from either side. Whenever an election happens that it was hacked, it was rigged, something happened, right? And regardless of whether that's true or not, the perception is there. And that means people have lost faith in our elections, which is one of its most important qualities. So something needs to change to assuage those fears. Now, secondly, and I don't hear a lot of people on the right or even in general pushing this, is that it's actually good to have public holidays where we have civic displays of virtue. It's good to engage and have physical, tangible reminders of the blessings of our civilization. And I think we could use more of those because people need to remember that voting is a very, very exceptional right as far as the human condition is concerned. The default position for human beings is rule through coercion and violence and domination. And really, we are very, very lucky to have that right to vote. So we should take a day, think about your picks, research your candidates, be excited about it, be proud of it. And that's why I think this is a proposal that would be a good idea.
I was telling you before we got on the air, last Tuesday was my very first time that I've ever had the opportunity to serve as a poll worker. And it was eye-opening in so many different ways. But what you just said about, how that voting, that really is an exercise of something that is not just, it's not casual. It's not like, yeah, let's go order a hot dog and a drink or whatever at Costco. I watched the gravity with which people came to that polling location. And I was very fortunate in that this was in kind of a poorer neighborhood. So there were a lot of elderly, a lot of people of different ethnicities who came. But I saw how seriously they took their franchise and the time they took in the voting booth to make sure that their vote not only was given, but that it counted. And it really impressed me that this is probably not something we should be taking for granted.
Right, absolutely. And actually those voters, those high propensity voters, those people that really do take it seriously and take a lot of patriotic duty and pride in the exercising this right are actually who I want to cater to. So I'm not a huge fan of the automatic voter registration or states like Nevada where they mail out a ballot to every eligible voter because I feel like that caters to the low information, low motivation voter. And maybe this will sound harsh, but frankly, if you don't, have a ton of excitement or a ton of interest in our elections, then I'm not really sure that you're fit to be making decisions that impact the rest of us. And I'm not really sure I want to cater to you and make it as easy as possible for you to participate. I would much rather, make it as easy as possible for people that want to participate to feel comfortable and secure in the outcome of our elections. And so that's the voter I really want to cater to. And ideally, that would be 100% of voters. But the reality is, and I think we saw that with the 2020 voter spike, is a lot of those people that voted for Joe Biden in 2020 were sort of low propensity, low interest voters. And I'm not even interested in catering to those people because I'm not sure they fully grasp what a privilege it is to live in a democracy and be able to vote.
Let's talk about the wisdom of creating a federal holiday. Now, you mentioned in your article here, we have a ton of useless holidays. I didn't know mashed potato day was a thing, but hey, it is. But what's the advantage of making Election Day a federal holiday like President's Day or Thanksgiving? What would that have the effect of doing as far as it would affect voting?
Well, it'd be a chance for the federal government to, for once, be a good role model and set a good precedent for businesses. I understand that a federal holiday doesn't mean that every worker automatically gets the day off, but what it does is it sets the precedent. It makes it more commonplace for people to have a whole day off, and that's really the first step. I understand that service workers, not everyone gets the day off. There will still be a need for absentee or mail-in ballots. I mean, for college students, right? If you're living out of state, of course you'll have to mail in one. If you're serving overseas in the military, of course you'll have to mail in a ballot. But this is all about centralizing the avenues by which ballots are coming in, reducing all these different streams, and making the process less opaque and easier to understand for your average person, because that's how you restore trust. But the core of it is, I just want the government to set a good precedent and say, hey, look, we're giving all of our employees the day off. You should do the same, private businesses, and do right by your employees and give them a chance to participate in our democracy.
And let's talk about how this would contribute to, say, things like in-person voting.
Well, of course, it would allow people, or allow the government rather, to tell people, hey, you have to vote in person. There's a lot less excuses for voting absentee or by mail. It's not just an automatic. You actually have to have a reason to do that. And also, it would allow more people to volunteer at a polling place. It would allow people to then be able to count ballots by hand or have more poll watchers. All of these things will reduce uncertainties and fears about the integrity of our election. And that's really the point I want to get to, is I want to reduce uncertainty and fear. And by leaving a whole day open for it, we can give more resources, put more resources towards it, and hopefully make that happen.
No, I'm with you. And like I was telling you off the air, I really took for granted every time I would show up to vote. It was just like, oh yeah, there's nice people. They're helpful. They make sure I'm registered and I'm voting at the right place and so forth. But I never until this year actually could appreciate the amount of work that goes into organizing all the various little precincts at the local level, staffing them, and making sure that all of the equipment, the computers and machines and everything is working properly. And then, of course, comes the really important part, and that is making sure that those votes that are cast are properly recorded, that, there's a chain of custody that is followed, so there can't be tampering or any other kind of mischief. And basically, it was a 13-and-a-half-hour day, but it was one of the most exhilarating days that I can remember, just because I think it's the first time I ever really got a glimpse of what the system is like. And as far as restoring my faith, in the system, at least at the local level, I came away very favorably impressed.
Right. Well, and that's just how complicated like your normal run-of-the-mill in-person voting is. So you might even think, how complicated is the mail-in balloting process or the absentee balloting? I saw somewhere that it goes through something like 13 steps for a mail-in ballot to be counted. That's too many. It's changing hands. By the way, it's also in the hands of the Postal Workers Union, which is a partisan organization. That leaves a lot of room for questions as well. And again, I'm not even sure if any of these fears were founded, but if even 1% of them are true, then it's reason enough to make a change. And that's exactly right. It's all about reducing the number of votes that are coming in from all these various sources and consolidating them through this one stream so that average people can understand it, and also giving people a day off so they can do what you did and go work at the polls and get a chance to participate in it. Because I would love to do that. I'm a college student. I have, a couple quizzes and an exam on election day or whatever. Like, I can't take the day off and participate even if I would have liked to. But hopefully if someone would have given me the day, then I would be able to go and participate in our election as well.
You mentioned the phrase civic virtue. I'd love you to take about 30 seconds just to explain, why does that matter in our day and age?
Because I think we've lost a lot of the understanding of what it means to live in a civilization, right? We are very proud of our rights, but we don't understand that rights also come with duties, right? I have the right to drive a car. I also have a duty to not drive drunk or drive like a maniac and kill someone. Every right comes with the requisite duty. And I think we take our rights for granted when we forget that there are duties that come along with them. And voting is one of our most important rights. And so we should be reminded that it is our civic duty to be well-informed, well participating voters, and do our research and actually take some time to get out there and support our candidates. And I think it's beautiful to have celebrations of that, right? We have monuments, we have museums, we have all these other holidays. So I think adding one more to celebrate our exceptional civilization is worthwhile. Again,
we are talking with Ethan Watson, a Young Voices contributor. Where can people find you on social media, Ethan?
Brian, people can find me on X at ERWatson13. That's where I'm trying to grow most of my following. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. This is our fourth and final segment today, and we are happy to welcome back to the program Daniel Idfresne. Daniel, it's good to see you once again. For people who are meeting you for the first time, could you take just a moment to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Daniel. I'm 20 years old. I'm a junior at Syracuse University, and I write for Young Voices. I also do segments like these for Young Voices. And I guess to simply put, I'm a political commentator. I write, I hop on TV segments, radio segments, and I talk about politics, particularly around Gen Z.
Well, and Gen Z is a generation that is very well steeped in not only politics but also social media. I'm looking at a piece that you wrote back in August for the New York Post, how politics and social media are ruining young people and fueling harassment. Where do we begin on a subject like this?
As a Gen Zer myself, as a 20-year-old myself, when I first saw the assassination attempt back in July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, I was watching live like many other Americans were. At first I was shocked like many Americans, but then, my second thought was, wow, he's 17, or he's 20. Why would he do something like this? And as somebody who's 20 myself, I have a few things I can point to in my life, in particular, points of potential radicalization that I could speculate as to what could have motivated crooks to do such an act. And the biggest two is social media and the classroom.
Now, you actually give an example of something you experienced personally in a classroom that illustrates how this younger generation, it's not just a matter of, well, they've kind of passively absorbed some of the the rancor that's going on out there, but in some cases it's actively being fed to them. Talk to me about your experience in Brooklyn.
Yeah, so in the New York Post piece, I referred to when Donald Trump first got elected as president back when I was in 7th grade, and this is sort of a universal experience for many people my age or around my age at that time, where in New York City, in Brooklyn, you really get this eerie feeling the day after the election, and I walked into the classroom, and there I see, my teacher sulking, and they decided to have an emotional emphasis on emotional town hall on how, Donald Trump may end the nation as we know it and whatnot. And as a 7th grader, I mean, I don't really care about politics much. I don't know what's going on, but that's one of the experiences that I still remember to this day, even though I'm into politics now, and it's an experience that many others remember, just as I interviewed other Gen Zers, 20-year-olds in that piece. As a matter of fact, because it's election season now, I talked to my friends who are in my grade, 20-year-olds, just like me, and I was talking to a friend, Steven, and he had a similar experience in 7th grade as well, and he talked about it vividly.
Well, and I love that you point out here, it wasn't so much a matter of, okay, kids, now there are a lot of people that are divided, and if you wonder why there are adults who are so worked up about this, they didn't really so much offer you this broader perspective of here's what's going on and why people might be upset, so much as you basically were just exposed to people bashing Trump and sobbing, and never really any context to better understand the system. You were just told that it's a mess, and essentially left with a bunch of emotional things to sort out. Talk to me about what has happened since that time, particularly with social media, that tends to intensify that kind of I'm going to use the word poisoning or trashing of people's psyches.
Yes, and Brian, before I get into social media, I want to emphasize the point that you made about the emotional aspect of the town hall, and that's a common theme within education. I mean, the first time I prominently remembered it was that 7th grade experience, but since then, I mean, whenever something significant, at least politically, happens in our country, the town hall is the emotional town hall is never about policies or how our system work or the constitutionality of what's going on or what are the different sides saying, and let's actually take neutral lens to dissect it, it's again that emotional appeal, good versus bad, normative statements that don't really let us as students dive deeper into the situation that sort of causes now you see a meltdown with many different people on the left. With this recent election, I would say that is because of the way our school systems are having us digest political occurrences in the country. And this is emphasized by social media because, first you're in a classroom and your teachers enforce emotion politics, particularly to one side, particularly to the left. And that gets reinforced on social media. Now you're in these echo chambers that now push the same point of view that your teachers have promulgated in the classroom. You now see it in social media when you're scrolling through Instagram Reels or TikTok. And if, like, for example, let's take the Black Lives Matter riots, where there's stories that are being posted on Instagram. If you refuse to post that black square, now you out yourself as somebody else, because to the left, silence is political violence.
Yeah.
And so, I've had friends come up to me and tell me about their stories of refusing to post a black square, particularly girlfriends of mine, like my female friends coming up to me and telling me, hey, other girls like in my class, in my grade, has sort of been nasty to me because I haven't posted that black square or haven't posted that solidarity for Gaza story on Instagram. And so that's how it becomes a negative feedback loop between the classroom setting and social media.
And you mentioned that this actually can open the door to not just, some disapproval, but actually outright harassment for some people.
Yes. And for those who are my age, our social lives is our entire lives. Obviously we go to school, and I'm in college right now to learn, but a huge part of the school experience and the college experience is the social life. And so if you're like, for me, for example, in the Northeast, where a heavy part of the culture is being Democrat, that can cost you in school notes and getting invited to parties and whatnot. And so many people stay silent or just post what they need to post to get by.
Well, and the sad thing too, and we've seen this in the last week, that kind of radical thinking and sometimes radical rhetoric sometimes leads people to a place of desperation. I don't know how many people have actually either acted on threats of becoming suicidal and taken their lives, but it sounds like there are some people who were pushed far enough to the edge that they actually went there. And I feel compassion for them. I don't feel as much compassion for the people who fueled that sense of despair that left them feeling like they really had nothing left to lose at that point.
Yes, I agree with you. A very easy example that we could take is after this particular election, with Donald Trump winning, we saw, like women on TikTok shaving their heads in protest. And, again, when the political is personal, which is what academics on the left have promulgated for almost 60 years now, then shaving your head becomes a viable option of protest when you don't get your way. And again, I agree with you. I sympathize with those people, but not really for the academics who've been pushing this sort of ideology for the betterment of 60, 70 years now. The good news is with this Donald Trump victory, we may be seeing the end of woke politics, depending on how the next 4 years go.
Yeah, and actually, I'm hoping the next 2 months go well so that we can get to the next 4 years and hopefully turn that corner. Again, we're talking with Daniel Idfresne. Daniel, I really appreciate your take on this, and I agree wholeheartedly with your article here in the New York Post. Where can people follow you on social media, and where can they follow more of your work?
Well, you can follow me on X. You can follow me on Instagram at Daniel Idfresne. Last name pretty complicated. Idfresne. Daniel Idfresne. You can find me. I write for Young Voices, so you can find me on their website. I tend to write things here and there, so just follow me on social media.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I look forward to our next conversation.
Again, thank you for having me.